Hello students, today we are going to go to Gogol's first day, chapter 7 in your book. Jhumpa Lahiri was born in London and raised in Rhode Island. She is the recipient of Guggenheim Fellowship and author of 2 previous books. Her debut collection of stories, Interpreter of Maldives, was awarded the Pulitzer Prize. This chapter, Gogol's first day, is an extract from The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. She lives in Brooklyn in New York. Gogol Ganguly is a young Bengali boy who lives in America. So he is a young Bengali boy, but he lives in America. He is about to start going to school for the first time. His parents, Ashok and Ashima, tell him that he will be called Nikhil when he is in school. So they are going to call him with a different name, okay, and that name is Nikhil, but parents call him by the name of Gogol. Gogol has never been called Nikhil before, and he cannot understand why his parents have made this decision. So Nikhil is unable to understand why his parents are giving him, a new name, a new identity to him. Why this name Gogol is not right for the school. Gogol doesn't want a new name. He can't understand why he has to answer to anything else. Answer to means respond when his name is called. So he can't understand why does he has to respond to any other name than Gogol. Why can't he just keep his name as Gogol? Why do I have to have a new name? He asks his parents, tears springing to his eyes. Now here Gogol is uncomfortable with the new identity. It gives him as if he is a different person in school, unfamiliar to himself. It would be one thing if his parents were to call him Nikhil too. Yes, of course. Even if his parents called him Nikhil, then he would have been comfortable with the same name in the school. To him, it looks like as though he was, like 2 different persons. They have different identity. One is Gogol, one is Nikhil. So he's not able to identify himself with Nikhil. But they tell him that the new name will be used only by the teachers and children at school. He is afraid to be Nikhil, someone he doesn't know and who doesn't know him. So he feels they are 2 different people. His parents tell him that they each have 2 names too. So to make the boy comfortable, the parents tell him that even they have 2 names. So even you have to have 2 names, as do all their Bengali friends in America. So they are living in America and their friends also have 2 names, and all their relatives in Calcutta. So it's not only in America, but in Calcutta that's a tradition according to them that they have to have 2 names. It's a part of growing up, they tell him, part of being Bengali. So that's a Bengali tradition, as I told you. They write it for him on a sheet of paper, ask him to copy it over 10 times. They tell him, they just write it on the paper and ask him to, copy it down so that he gets comfortable with the name. Don't worry, his father says, to me and your mother, you will never be anyone but Gogol. So the father understands that he is a little uncomfortable. Just to comfort him, he says, to us you will always be Gogol. Gogol does not understand or the explanation his parents give him, though they feel they have comforted him. He is confused that he is now a person with 2 identities, one private and one public. Gogol is afraid to be Nikhil, someone he does not know and who does not know him. At school, Ashok and Gogol are greeted by the secretary, Mrs. McNabb, who asks Ashok to fill out a registration form. So he's been asked to fill out the registration form. He provides a copy of Gogol's birth certificate and immunization record. Now, What's an immunization record? It is a list of preventive medicines given to a child as protection against certain diseases, which Mrs. McNabb puts in a folder along with the registration. This way, Mrs. McNabb says, leading them to the principal's office. Now they are heading towards the principal's office. The name on the door says Candace Lepetus. Mrs. Lepetus is she's a tall, slender woman with short white blonde hair. Slender means gracefully thin. She looks at the registration form and smiles kindly at the boy. Now here boy is referred to Gogol, who is clutching his father's hand. Clutching here means holding tightly. He is holding on to his father's hand. He is scared. He is, in a new environment. Welcome to elementary school, Nikhil. I am your principal, Mrs. Lepidus. So she introduces himself and welcomes Nikhil, that is Gogol. Gogol looked down at his sneakers. Now, why is he looking down at his sneakers? Because he is overwhelmed by the situation in which even he is a stranger to himself. He does not recognize that name. The way the principal pronounces his new name is different from the way his parents say it. The second part of it is longer, sounded like heel. So, how is the way that principal is pronouncing his name? It is Nikhil. Okay. She bends down so that her face is level with his and puts her hand on his shoulder. Can you tell me how old are you, Nikhil? So she asks him another question. She asks him how old he is. When the question is repeated and there is still no response, Mrs. Lapidus asks Mr. Ganguly, does Nikhil follow English? So she's already asked, Gogol 2 questions and he does not answer. So the principal thinks that he is unable to follow the language. That's why she questions her father. Of course he does, Ashok says. My son is perfectly bilingual. Bilingual means able to use 2 different languages. In order to prove that Gogol knows English, Ashok does something he has never done before. He addresses his son in careful accented English. Now what does accented English means? English spoken in the Indian way. Go on, Gogol, he says. Tell Mrs. Lapidus how old you are. Now here, Gogol's father speaks to him in English with an American accent to impress the principal. This further bewilders Gogol, who has never heard his father talk to him that way. The situation is hilarious in the way it brings out the way an Indian tries to impress the American in an American context. What was that, Mrs. Lapidus says? That name you called him? Something with a G? So she realizes that Nikhil has got another name. Oh, that is what we call him at home only. But his good name should be is. He nods his head firmly. Nikhil. Now what is a good name? Good name, a custom in West Bengal and Bangladesh, 2 names are given to each person. A good name which is used on all legal documents and a nickname which is used by family members and close friends. The 2 names may or may not be similar. Good name is also an expression common to North India. Now here the principal realizes that Gogol has another name and does not understand or accept his father's explanation of Nikhil being his good name or school name. Okay, so Mrs. Lapidus frowns. I'm afraid I don't understand good name. Yes. Mrs. Lapidus studies the registration form. She has not had to go through this confusion with the other 2 Indian children in the school. She opens up the folder and examines the immunization record and the birth certificate. There seems to be some confusion, Mr. Ganguly, she says. According to these documents, your son's legal name is Gogol. So she understands from these documents that the legal name is Gogol and they are using another name for him, and that's the reason he is not responding. This is correct, but please allow me to explain. So he accepts whatever the principal is saying. That you want us to call him Nikhil? That is correct. Mrs. Lapidus nods. The reason being? So, the reason being means a way of asking what is the reason. That is our wish. So, that's what Ashok responds, that it's their wish, they want to change his name. I'm not sure I follow you, Mr. Ganguly. Do you mean that Nikhil is a middle name or a nickname? Many of the children go by nicknames here. On this form, there is a space. So the principal is asking, she's not sure what he's trying to say. Is that Nikhil his mid name? His middle name. Many of the children go by nicknames. There are so many children who take up the nickname. No, it's not a middle name, Ashok says. He is beginning to lose patience. He's not able to make her understand what it is. He has no middle name. The boy's good name, his school name is Nikhil. But Mrs. Lapidus presses her lips together and smiles. She wants to say something. She stops herself. But clearly, he doesn't respond. So she, comes out with the feelings that yes, he's not responding to this name, Nikhil. Please, Mrs. Lapidus, Ashok says, it is very common for a child to be confused at first. I assure you, he will grow accustomed. He will grow accustomed to means he will get used to it. So Ashok is, requesting the principal that it is very common that he is getting confused now, but later on he will get used to his name. He bends down and this time in Bengali, calmly and quietly asks Gogol to please answer when Mrs. Lapidus asks a question. Don't be scared, Gogol, he says, raising his son's chin with his finger. You're a big boy now. So what is his father doing? He is just trying to calm him down and tell him just answer whatever the principal is asking you. Though Mrs. Lapidus does not understand a word, she listens carefully and hears that name again, Gogol. Lightly in pencil, she writes it down on the registration form. Now here, look at the principal. She is able to understand that Gogol is actually not comfortable with the name Nikhil, okay, and his parents are not understanding the fact. Ashok hands over the lunch box and a windbreaker in case it gets cold. Now, what's a windbreaker, children? It is a thin coat which can resist cold wind and light rain. In case it gets cold, he thanks Mrs. Lapidus. Be good, Nikhil, and he says to his son, advises his son to be good. He says in English, and then after a moment's hesitation, he is gone. He pauses there and then he goes from there. When they are alone, Mrs. Lapidus asks, are you happy to be entering elementary school, Gogol? So what does he answer? Let's see. My parents want me to have another name in school. So he confesses as soon as the parents leave, father leaves, he confesses that it is his parents who want another name. And what about you, Gogol? Do you want to be called by another name? So she asks, what is your suggestion? What is your feelings about it? What are your perceptions? After a pause, he shakes his head. He thinks, he pauses, he thinks, and then he shakes his head. So what does Mrs. Lapidus ask? Is that a no? He nods. Yes. Then it's settled. It's settled means it is agreed or decided. Can you write your name on this piece of paper? So she asks him to write his name on that paper. Gogol picks up a pencil, grips it tightly, and forms the letter of the only word he has learned thus far to write from memory, getting the L backward due to nerves. Now, what do you mean by due to nerves? Because he was a little afraid and anxious. Now, here, Mrs. Lapidus is portrayed as a kind person concerned about her pupil's comfort level. She's seeing if he's comfortable or not. She decides to use the name Gogol, which is familiar with. She also appreciates his handwriting, though she could have pointed out that he had written the L backward. What beautiful penmanship you have. Penmanship means handwriting you have, Mrs. Lapidus says. She tears up the old registration form and asks Mrs. McNabb to type up a new one. Then she takes Gogol by the hand and they walk down a hallway with painted cement walls. She opens the door and Gogol is introduced to his new teacher. So he goes and he gets introduced to the new teacher. Her name is Miss Watkins, a woman with hair in two braids. Braid means plaits, wearing overall and clogs. What are overall? It's a garment consisting of trousers with a piece of cloth covering the chest, held up by straps over the shoulders. And what's a clogs? Shoes with thick wooden soles. Inside the classroom, it's a small universe of nicknames, means many children with many different nicknames. Andrew is Andy, Alexandra Sandy, William, Billy, Elizabeth, Lizzie is nothing like the schooling Gogol's parents have known. Fountain pens and polished black shoes and notebooks and good names and sirs or madams at a young age. So, here in Gogol school, the focus is on the children feeling comfortable in new and strange environment. The teachers dressed in casual clothes. The pet names of the children are written against their formal names on the board so that the familiar names could be used. In Gogol's father's days, just a generation earlier, the stress was on a proper code of conduct. Teachers were addressed formally as sir or madam, and students in smart uniforms went to their formal names. At the end of his first day, he is sent home with a letter to his parents from Mrs. Lapidus, explaining that due to their son's preference, he will be known as Gogol at school. Preference means a strong liking. So, they prefer what the child wants. Okay. And what about the parents' preference? Ashima and Ashok wonder, shaking their heads. But since neither of them feels comfortable pressing the issue means insisting that something be done. They have no choice but to give in. Given is they have to accept whatever has been told to them. And so Gogol's education begins. At the top of sheets of scratchy pale yellow paper, he writes out his pet name again and again. Pet name is a name used at home or by family and friends, as well as the alphabet in capital and lowercase. So he is trying in different ways. He learns to add and subtract and to spell his first words. On the front cover of his textbook, he writes his name in pencil. In art class, his favorite hour of the week, he carves his name with paper clips into the bottom of cake cups and bowls. He pastes uncooked pasta on a cardboard and leaves his signature in fat brush strokes below paintings. Day after day, he brings his creations home to Ashima, means whatever he is making, he gets them home, who hangs them proudly on the refrigerator door. So what does she do? His mother, she hangs it on the fridge door. Gogol, G. He signs his work in the lower right hand corner, as if there were a need to distinguish him from any other Gogol in the school. Distinguish him from means to show that he is a different from others. Now Gogol has this obsession of writing his full name. Probably it's to assure his parents that his name will always stay as Gogol, a name he's familiar with and not any other name. Thank you for watching my video. Like it if you have understood and subscribe to my channel for the latest updates.